Doe, a deer, a female deer. Ray, a drop of golden sun. Me, a name I call myself. Far, a long, long way to run. So, a needle pulling thread. La, a note to follow. So, tea, a drink with jam and bread. And that brings us back to the Respectfully Inspired Podcast, Solo, Episode 64, Discipline versus Identity, How to Easily Create Habits. Okay, robot voice is off. Welcome back to the show, Respectfully Inspired with Aussie Films. Today is a solo episode, and it is a solo episode that comes with a big announcement, which is that for the foreseeable future, I'm not going to do 3 guest episodes and 1 solo episode. I'm going to do 1 solo episode, 1 guest episode, and alternate. So that's why this is episode 64 between solo episodes 62 and 66. I've realized that as a small podcaster, I've tried to get so many guests, and I've been so blessed to have guests come, and really haven't struggled to get guests, but I realized that I'm getting guests who have never been on a podcast or don't really have a desire to be on a podcast. They're just coming on because they like me as a friend or they respect what I'm building. So they come on the show, and I take credit for the mediocreness of some of those episodes. But the point is that from now on, I think I have a lot more to offer as a teacher. I'm always reading books. I'm reading the Bible every morning. I'm consuming content that I want to teach, and I think that I have more to offer as a teacher. So I'm going to do solo episodes every Monday and guest episodes on Thursday. I'm going to make the quality of my guests better, people who are more comfortable on camera, people who represent the Soul Wealth brand better, and that's how it's going to be going forward for the foreseeable future. And so today is episode 64, Discipline versus Identity, How to Easily Create Hard Habits. The goal of this episode, the thesis of this episode, is to, 1, teach you the difference between identity and discipline, as well as the difference between motivation and discipline. Wait, let me say that again. The goal of this episode, the thesis of this episode, is to, 1, teach you the difference between discipline and identity, as well as motivation and identity, and 2, to convince you that you should focus on identity as a way of creating habits in your dream lifestyle. I like to start off every episode with my why behind the show, which is that I want to inspire you to invest in soul wealth. So I primarily describe soul wealth as changing the way you measure success from wealth metrics, money, possessions, achievements, and status to soul wealth metrics, relationships, and memories. I want to go a little bit deeper on that idea because now that I'm going solo on Mondays and guests on Thursdays, I realized that I got to expand my knowledge of the Soul Wealth brand. So if soul wealth can essentially be explained by relationships and memories, this is how you explain it. Soul wealth, it's the wealth of your soul. You break that into relationships. Relationships are the fuel for your soul. So it's your relationship with God, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your friends, your relationship with others. In that order, those things fuel your soul. On the other half of soul wealth, you have memories. Memories are the currency of your soul. It's interesting calling memories the currency of your soul because it's not like a dollar currency where you go and exchange memories for some good at the store. Memories are the currency of your soul because you can't lose them. They belong to your soul. They can't be taken away from you. Money can be taken away from you. Your possessions, your house can be taken away from you, but your memories cannot. I guess you could make an argument for schizophrenia and Alzheimer's taking your memories away, but I don't know. You get the point. And it is a currency, not in the sense that you can trade it and bargain with people, but it's a currency in the sense that I can bring a bunch of minds together, a bunch of friends together, and if I bring a bunch of friends together, maybe I pay for us to go on a trip and I lose money, but I gain a bunch of memories, and all those people who go on the trip, they also gain memories. And even if I'm not involved in their future, will they still have memories with me? And therefore my currency has gone into their life. And a huge goal of mine is to create memories with an abundant amount of people, deep, meaningful memories with an abundant amount of people. And the great thing about memories being the currency of the soul is that you can't lose them. You can have bad memories, you can have ungood memories, memories where you learn lessons, but you can't lose your memories. Again, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, I don't know. It's a different debate. But so that's the thing. Soul wealth, relationships, fuel of the soul, memories, currency of the soul. Let's get into the episode. The goal of this episode, which I already know I said, the thesis is that you would, 1, know the difference between discipline and identity, and you would 2, know the difference between motivation and identity, and 3, you would want to utilize identity as a means of creating habits in your life, of creating the best possible lifestyle. So first, I'm just going to define discipline and identity and motivation, and then we'll get into it. So first of all, discipline, this discipline that we're talking about today is in terms of doing something. It's not discipline as in my child stole a cookie from me, so now he's getting a spanking. That's a different type of discipline. We're talking about discipline as in you are doing something when you don't want to do it. So I say there's an acronym, SCS. Motivation is doing something because you have a burst of inspiration. It's doing something and you will only do it for a period of time, and it generally roots outside of you. So I might watch a David Goggins video, and David Goggins gets me amped, so I'm motivated to go to the gym. But if I don't go to the gym in that period of motivation after watching the David Goggins video, then I'm not going to get to the gym. That's motivation. Discipline is, I'm going to go to the gym regardless if I want to. I might wake up and I don't want to go to the gym, but I made a commitment to myself, so I'm going to go anyways. That's discipline. Identity is doing something because it's so core to your being. Identity is, I've been in sports my entire life. After I stopped playing sports, I immediately got in the gym. I've never lived without fitness in my life. Therefore, if I don't go to the gym, I don't feel like myself. That is an identity. I identify as an athlete. I identify as someone who goes to the gym. I like to bring up this acronym, SCS. You start something because of motivation. Generally, it's New Year's resolution. You watch a video online and you say, I'm going to start a new habit. I'm going to go to the gym. You start it because of motivation. SC, you continue it because of discipline. Discipline, you say, I'm going to go to the gym even if I don't feel like it because I made a commitment to do that. You sustain something, SCS. You sustain something with your identity to it. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that discipline without identity is a ticking time bomb. So you can say, I'm going to go to the gym every single day. You can say, I'm going to go to the gym every single day. But if that never becomes a part of who you are, then all you're doing is you're just forcing yourself to go to the gym. It's not something core to who you are. And eventually you will burn out. This is how I should say it. Discipline without identity leads to burnout. And the gym is not really the best example of this because I think the gym is one of those things where it's hard for people to enjoy it. Although it being one of my identities, I do enjoy the gym. But let's take something else. Let's take YouTuber. I really genuinely identify as a YouTuber, in this case, a podcaster. But before I was a YouTuber because I was disciplined enough to be a YouTuber. So I would post videos online, but no matter how disciplined, I would always burn out. I would always hit a wall where I would be posting a vlog every single week, 3 times a week. And then eventually I would lose momentum and I would just not post for months because it wasn't in my identity. I didn't truly believe that I was a YouTuber. I just truly believed in my work ethic, and therefore, because of my work ethic, I had good discipline. Well, once though, here's the issue with identity. The issue with identity is that a lot of people think identity comes from numbers. I can't identify as a podcaster until I have 10,000 monthly listeners, or I don't see myself as a YouTuber until I have 1 million subscribers. But identity has nothing to do with numbers. You can have 10 million subscribers, but if you feel like that's not enough, then you're operating on discipline, because what you're saying is, I don't have enough. I still need to chase after something. I still need to have the discipline to get to the next level. And that's why I feel like I see all these interviews with Mr. Beast and Elon Musk, and they're talking about being at the top of the game, and they're not the most joyful, peace-filled, happy people, because what they do is out of discipline. They do something because they show up over and over and over again. And also, I want to clarify that this is not a thesis against discipline. I'm going to make an argument for using identity with discipline. They're not mutually exclusive. But what I'm saying is discipline without identity is a ticking time bomb. Eventually, you're going to burn out because it's not fulfilling your identity. It's not giving you a purpose. You're just doing it just to do it, which is great. So that begs the question. Hopefully by now you guys understand the difference between discipline, motivation, and identity, but you may be asking yourself, well, how do I build an identity? When I brought up the gym example, I said, for all my life, I played sports. And then after I played sports, I immediately got in the gym, and then I haven't left the gym since. And now, when I first started going to the gym, I went to the gym out of discipline. I didn't look forward to going to the gym. I recognized that my mental health was better when I went to the gym, but I did it off motivation and discipline. I would literally like listen to David Goggins and stuff, and I would go to the gym and I would show up no matter what. Nowadays, I actually miss the gym more than I used to go. So I used to go 6 days every week, no matter what. Nowadays, I'll go 4 to 5 days a week. Sometimes I miss, sometimes I'm traveling, I can't go to the gym. But I don't worry about it because going to the gym has been a part of my life for so long that there's no situation in which I see myself quitting the gym, because being a gym goer is a part of my identity. Therefore, if I need to travel for this podcast, like in the summer when I spontaneously walked 150 miles across Spain and I don't have a gym membership in Spain and I'm walking 20 miles a day and therefore I can't go to the gym, therefore I'm not feeling guilty about that. And I'm not worried that when I get back to the US, I'm going to have to regain momentum with the gym, because I know it's core to my being. It's a part of my identity. So how do you get to an identity? And this is where I want to make the difference between discipline and identity. Discipline is the bridge to identity. So statistically speaking, it takes 21 days to build a habit. So statistically speaking, if you go to the gym on discipline, on motivation for 21 days in a row, that will become a habit. And your habits work in synchronicity with your identity. Your habits work in synchronicity with your identity. So discipline and motivation are a bridge to get to your identity. But what also defines your identity is how much you believe it to be true. When I meet someone, I confidently say I'm a podcaster because I believe it to be true. I don't believe it to be true because I have a certain amount of listeners or followers on Instagram. I believe it to be true because every week on Monday and Thursday, I post a podcast. Alex Hormozy has a great quote where he says something along the lines of, if you don't achieve your dreams by shouting affirmations in the mirror, you achieve your dreams by creating an innumerable stack of evidence that you are who you say you are. I know I'm a podcaster because for 8 months in a row, I posted a podcast on Monday and Thursday. That is why this feels like my identity. I truly believe it to be my identity. When I look at the future, I don't see a future without podcasting. Therefore, it is a identity of mine, which we'll talk about in a second. So discipline and identity are really bridges. SCS. You start something because of motivation, you continue something because of discipline, and you sustain something because of identity. The reason I can go to the gym and not worry about quitting, not worry about having discipline or motivation, that I can take extra days off, that I can travel, is because it's in my identity. It's ingrained to who I am. So therefore, I don't worry about missing days like I did when it was solely discipline. But habits create your identity, and your identity creates your habits. They work in synchronicity. So it's not an argument for discipline or identity. It's an argument for identity with discipline. Discipline without identity is a ticking time bomb. Discipline with identity is a thriving lifestyle. Let me say that one more time. Discipline without identity is a ticking time bomb. Discipline with identity is a thriving lifestyle. You know you have an identity when you believe something is true to you, to who you are. I believe I'm a podcaster because I show up on Monday and Thursdays and I post my podcast. When I'm in conversations, I tell people about my podcast. When people ask what I do, I say I'm a podcaster. Therefore, that is my identity. Now, I think when people think about identity, they think of one thing. If someone asks you, what is your identity? You're probably going to give a one answer. I would like to make the argument that you have one main identity and that you have numerous sub-identities. So for me, my main identity is as a Christian, as a follower of Christ. That is my main identity. Some sub-identities is that I'm a podcaster, I'm a vlogger, I'm an athlete, I'm someone who likes public speaking. Those are my sub-identities. Your main identity should rule a majority of your decisions. Or when I say should rule, I'm not saying you should pick an identity and that rules your decision. I'm saying you know what your main identity is because it rules your decisions. So let's take one of my main identities and one of my sub-identities. So my main identity is as a follower of Christ. And a big sub-identity of mine is as a podcaster. There's going to be times in my life where I run into crossroads between a main identity and a sub-identity. Let's say, for example, I'm posting podcasts to YouTube and they say you can no longer talk about Jesus on YouTube. Well, then I have a decision. Do I remove Jesus from my podcast and continue talking on YouTube? Or do I drop my sub-identity and post my podcast, my Christian podcast talking about Jesus on Rumble or Kick or a vice versa platform? And so generally your main identity and your sub-identities will work in unison. As in this case, podcasting is my job. Oftentimes in my job, I like to talk about Christ, which was my main identity, but they work in unison right now. They might not always work in unison, but the goal is that your identities and your sub-identities work in unison. I would like to argue that your main identity should be something that can't be taken away from you. So for a majority of this podcast, I've been using the example of an identity as a gym goer, as an athlete. I could get in a car crash today and be paralyzed for life, and my identity is taken away from me. I am no longer a gym goer, or if I am a gym goer, it looks completely different. I can get in a car crash, have damage to my vocal cords, and I'm no longer a podcaster, or podcasting looks completely different. Those things can be taken away from you. I'm so happy to have Christ as the center of my identity because it can't be taken away from me. The identity is that the identity as a follower of Christ comes with many things, many sub-identities, which is that I'm a loved son of God, that I'm free, that I'm the light of the world, that I'm a co-worker with God. And so I think about those things and how they pour into my life. So I want to talk about some lifestyle habits, which is I've been sober, completely sober, no alcohol, no nicotine, bonus points, no self-pleasure, no masturbation for 2+ years, or like a year and a half to 2+ years. And I think people often look at me and they go, how'd you do it? And again, this goes back to discipline versus identity. If you're someone and you make a commitment to be sober for a year, like I made a commitment to be sober for a year, what that might look like if you're disciplined. Remember, the definition of discipline is doing something even when you don't want to do it. So what discipline looks like when you want to be sober is I go to the bar, all my friends are drinking, they offer me a drink and I want to drink it, but I have to say no. I go, no, I don't want to drink it. Or even earlier, all my friends invite me to go to the bar and I want to go to the bar with them, but I have to say no, can't do it because I'm sober and I don't want to put myself in that environment. But your heart wants to do it. You're choosing not to do it. Now, with my sobriety, which I really had virtually no struggle, no desire to drink, was not hard for me at all to go from 21 years old in a frat drinking all the time to absolutely no drinking, because my main identity as a follower of Christ, it says, be sober-minded. And I love Jesus more than anything. And so when Jesus says be sober-minded, and then furthermore, I'm obsessed with health. I'm obsessed with health. I'm obsessed with eating right, because at the beginning of my sober year, I got diagnosed with an autoimmune problem, and my autoimmune problem caused me to have brain fog. So in the dealing with brain fog, I try to figure out how can I get healthier? How can I limit my brain fog? And I found out something super important, which is that your gut directly affects your emotion. Your gut directly affects your health. Your gut is directly linked to your brain. And so I found this brain doctor, Dr. Amen, shout out Dr. Amen, who has scanned 20,000 brains in his life. He scanned the brains of celebrities. He scanned the brains of musicians, people who had rough childhoods, really successful people. And what he found is that alcohol in any amount, not just when you're a raging alcoholic, alcohol in any amount, even once a week, has long-term permanent effects on your brain. And so me, someone who has an autoimmune disease, who struggles with brain fog, who struggles with feeling stupid and doesn't want to feel stupid, finds out that one, I'm a follower of Christ and Christ says to be sober-minded. And two, alcohol has a long-term effect on my brain health and I already struggle with brain health. Well, then I no longer need to be the disciplined sober guy. I no longer need to go, oh, I'm not going to drink this drink. I want to drink it, but I'm not going to drink it. I just go, no, I don't want to feel horrible. I don't want to cause long-term damage to my brain, and I want to be the best follower of Christ I can be. So therefore, choosing to not drink it's implemented in my wants. I don't want to drink because I want the best health, because I want to be the best follower of Christ that I can be. So therefore, not drinking is no longer a discipline issue. It is now an identity issue. And because it's an identity issue, it's much, much easier to follow. I think that up until this point in the podcast, I was struggling to explain the difference, but I hope after that analogy, it makes sense. So I explained it with sobriety, with refraining from doing something, but I can also explain it with doing something. For example, I want to embrace God more. So I want to read my Bible more and I want to go to church more. Throughout my whole life, up until probably graduating senior year of high school, if you asked me what my least favorite subject was, I would have told you history. I hate history. It doesn't interest me at all. And I don't like reading. That's what I would have told you. So therefore, the idea of reading the Bible, which is a historic text that seemed super boring to me, even as a Christian, it sounded very unappealing. And when I would go to church services, they would be really boring to me because they're about the Bible, and the Bible was boring because it's a big historic text, and I don't like history, and I don't like reading. One day, a friend of mine gave me a book, Think and Grow Rich, and I said, okay, if I want to become the self-help discipline YouTube guy, then I need to be someone who reads. So I said, I'm going to force myself to read 10 pages of this book every day. And he gives me the book, Think and Grow Rich. And I open it up. And I couldn't stop myself from reading it. The information was so enjoyable to me. It wasn't history. It wasn't Romeo and Juliet, The Scarlet Letter, all these old-time books, which I thought was reading. I opened up a book about how to better myself, about productivity, about stuff that I'm really genuinely interested in. I read Think and Grow Rich. And from that moment on, I believed that reading was something that made me better, and I never struggled to read again. Literally, overnight, it was just an identity thing. I needed discipline once. I needed discipline once to go, hey, I'm going to get through this whole book 10 pages at a time. And then once I realized that I actually love this book, and there's a bunch of other books I love out there, I realized I don't need discipline to read. I just need to read the right books, read books that align with my identity. The same way as when I was a lukewarm Christian and history was boring to me and I didn't want to read. Well, once I found out I could read and I started reading the Bible, at first it was discipline. I said, I'm going to read the whole Bible in 1 year, and I'm going to look up how many chapters do I need to read a day to read the whole Bible in one year? 3 chapters a day. 3 chapters a day took me about 10 minutes a day, and I forced myself to do it. It was discipline. And the more and more I read the Bible, the more and more I felt I had a relationship with God, the more and more I enjoyed the Bible. When I first read the Bible all the way through, I was so hyper-focused on the New Testament. I was so hyper-focused on Jesus because the Old Testament was all history, and history is boring. Yes, I understand the New Testament is also history, but the New Testament, I got to see the life of Jesus. It felt modern. It felt tangible. The Old Testament felt like some boring history, 300 Spartans. I don't care. So when I first started, I focused on what I liked. I focused on the parts that aligned with my identity. My identity as a Christian was pretty much the New Testament, Jesus' teachings. Once I went through discipline and I read the entire Bible, and I got to the New Testament and the part I liked, well, then I started enjoying church more. And then the more I enjoyed church, the more church taught about the Old Testament, and the more church taught about the Old Testament, the more I enjoyed reading the Old Testament. And the more I enjoyed reading the Old Testament, the more I loved history. Now history is one of my favorite subjects because I love Christ. When I didn't love Christ, when Christ wasn't my identity, I hated history. It was something I needed discipline to be interested in. When I came to have an identity as a follower of Christ, I loved history. So I know I'm being super redundant here, and I hope people are following along. They listen through this whole episode. But the point is that discipline is a bridge to get to identity, and identity makes habits astronomically easier. Identity not only makes habits that you're trying not to do easier, it makes habits that you're trying to do easier. So in the example of me refraining from alcohol, I can just willpower, oh, I want to go out with my friends, but I don't want to drink, so I'm not going to. Oh, I'm out with my friends and they're offering me drinks and I want to drink it, but I'm not going to. No, my identity says that sober-minded is better. My identity says that I've done enough research to know the alcohol's effects on your brain that it's really easy for me to be sober. And guess what? I finished 2023. I finished my sober year. How much alcohol have I drinking? None. And I'm not holding myself to the standard. There's no more discipline involved. If I want to have a drink, I'll have a drink. But I don't want to have a drink because that's my identity. And I hope that concept is resonating and it's getting through with you. So that's refraining from something. And we also went over not refraining from something, which is adding something to your life. Like I wanted to read the Bible more. I wanted to enjoy reading, enjoy history. It started with discipline. It started with saying, hey, I'm going to read 3 chapters a day. But then once I found my identity as a follower of Christ, my heart changed. I truly loved it. If I don't read the Bible, some days, like if I'm traveling and I have to wake up at 6 a.m. and for some reason I can't read the Bible, I don't feel like myself. Literally, there's been times where I was waking up on El Camino de Santiago waking up at 6 a.m. to immediately walk 20 miles in the day. And I would like be on my iPhone reading at least one chapter of the Bible because that's true to my being. It makes me feel like myself. I no longer have to force myself to go to the gym. I no longer have to force myself to read the Bible. These are core to my being. Even podcasting is becoming something where it's like, I just took a long break to restructure the podcast, but I wasn't worried about not doing it because it's core to my being right now. This still needs to spend some more time, still needs to get cemented more into my life, but this is a major sub-identity. Christ is my main identity. Podcasting, being an athlete, being a vlogger, these are sub-identities that are also core to me. So I hope this episode made sense. I know it started a little bit slow. I'm just going to go through the points one more time and then I'll leave it at that. So discipline is doing something that you don't want to do, but you do it anyways. Motivation is doing something because you have a burst of inspiration. Identity is doing something because it's core to your being. You don't feel like yourself when you're not doing it. You get to an identity through discipline. You use discipline to achieve your desired identity. You can use motivation and discipline to achieve your desired identity. You should have a main identity, and your main identity shouldn't be something that can be taken away from you. My podcasting career can be taken away from me. My physical health can be taken away from me. My identity as a follower of Christ cannot be taken away from me. Again, it would be an interesting debate with Alzheimer's and schizophrenia, but you get the point. Main identity, sub-identities. Once you have an identity rooted in something, it is astronomically easier to be disciplined in that thing because it feels like core to who you are. It is not discipline. It is not discipline or identity. It is identity with discipline. Identity being the leading factor. Discipline without identity is a ticking time bomb. Discipline without identity is a ticking time bomb. You're preparing yourself for burnout. You're preparing yourself for a purposeless life. You're preparing yourself to hit achievements but not have any purpose in them. That is what discipline without identity is. Discipline with identity is a thriving lifestyle. Discipline with identity is being able to do all the hard habits at a much easier scale, at a much easier rate. And so that is the conclusion of solo podcast 64, Discipline versus Identity, how to easily create habits. That's that. I love you all. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we're logging out.